invito a que tomemos una respiración profunda juntos. Y, pues bueno, en esta respiración agradecer a todas y a todos los que han existido, a los 1000 atrás, a los 1000 adelante, a todos los guardianes y guardianas del tiempo y del espacio, al mundo de arriba, al mundo del medio, al mundo de abajo, y a todos los seres, a esta chispa divina, esta inteligencia divina que nos une en en un solo corazón. Y pues estoy muy emocionada de poder tener este espacio de charla, de compartir, ¿no? De ir abriendo esta conversación. Voy a compartir por aquí rápidamente unas diapositivas. Me cuentan si las ven, me hacen una ceñita. ¿Si están viendo? No veo las cámaras. Ok, gracias, Ángel. Súper. Eh, entonces aquí, pues, gracias como a la chispa divina que ha viajado infinitamente eh, en la energía, la frecuencia, el sonido primordial de ser luz, de ser energía, y cómo esto se ha adaptado en matrices eh, perfectas de la creación, de ser luz a transformarnos y manifestarnos en, en materia, que es lo que estamos experienciando aquí en la Tierra, todos los seres del reino vegetal, animal, mineral y todos los seres humanos también. Y en esa misma matriz, que también es una matriz, como lo vemos aquí en la forma, que es un toroide, como una dona, que es energía que fluye, que interconecta, somos campos de interconexión entre el cosmos, la Tierra, nuestros propios corazones. Y depende también de ese sonido, esa frecuencia primordial, ese amor eh, que nutre todos los campos de lo que somos en los diferentes cuerpos físico, mental, espiritual y emocional como humanos. Esto es al network, ¿no? A la red a donde nos conectamos. Entonces, si vibramos en amor, estamos conectándonos a la matriz divina del fluido y la información, porque es como estar cableados dentro de la información, del intercambio y la reciprocidad de la existencia. Si estamos en miedo, pues ya vemos aquí lo que sucede. Este campo es un campo que está muy interrelacionado, somos una tecnología divina, somos una biotecnología, y este es importante el término porque era muy retador, ¿no? Espíritu, tierra, tecnología, y es cómo entendemos la palabra tecnología dentro de nosotros mismos, dentro de nuestros múltiples sistemas complejos que trabajan en simultánea y que principalmente el corazón es un pulsar que está conectado al corazón de la galaxia y al corazón de la Tierra en ese mismo intercambio de información y de cómo la vida se ha ido retroalimentando, mejorando, adaptando, integrando conocimientos, aprendiendo y estando en constante intercambio, sobre todo de esta gran maestra que tenemos y que nos nutre, que es la tierra. El reino vegetal nos muestra desde la inteligencia natural cómo se interconecta y cómo nutre también este puenteo desde la energía, la vibración, la frecuencia, pero también cómo está en un constante thriving, ¿no? Que es en inglés, me encanta esa palabra, el medrar, el prosperar, siempre está en ese constante cómo dar las posibilidades a la vida. Es una danza hermosa que sigue mostrándonos la resiliencia, la adaptación, cómo la vida busca las diferentes formas para poderse adaptar. Y esto nos lleva a una inteligencia colectiva. Entonces, bueno, aquí rápidamente compartiéndoles también desde lo ancestral, desde los pueblos originarios de esta visión. en donde estamos en un tiempo espiral, ¿sí? No es un tiempo lineal como lo hemos vivido en otras eras, es el entendimiento del tiempo espiral. Y en esta cosmovisión de los indígenas de la Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta y del pueblo muisca aquí en el centro de Colombia, cada vez que respiramos, cada vez que pensamos, estamos en este constante fluido conectado a todo, en este constante espiral. Entonces viene la espiral del alma, al cuerpo, a la pareja, a la familia, a la comunidad, al territorio, a la madre tierra, al sistema solar y al útero cósmico. Todos estamos conectados dentro del mismo vientre de la madre tierra. Todos venimos conectados también desde la frecuencia del agua que da la vida para manifestarse aquí en sus diferentes posibilidades, colores, sabores, en la creatividad de esa chispa divina. Y entender esta conexión es entender que lo que pasa dentro de nosotros también pasa afuera, ¿no? Cómo es esta interconectividad y este diseño perfecto de la vida dentro de nosotros en este mundo complejo y biotecnología donde somos simbiontes, o sea, somos un ser que aborda y que acoge muchas comunidades internas como parásitos, patógenos. Bueno, sabemos que tenemos un cuerpo orgánico y que cargamos con mucha comunidad adentro, pero también nos conectamos a estas diferentes escalas. Esto nuestros pueblos originarios lo han cuidado, lo han guardianado por millones de años y han diseñado sus asentamientos, sus tecnologías sociales, sus tecnologías ancestrales de sanación, de construcción, de manejo del agua, del alimento, a través de estas matrices cósmicas terrenales. Y es allí pues donde necesitamos interconectar el hecho de la inteligencia natural versus la inteligencia artificial, que es algo que nos está trayendo el reto de este nuevo tiempo, ver esta tecnología como una muestra y un ejemplo de cómo el Internet nos está mostrando, como un aparato de sonido nos está mostrando algo pragmático que si saltamos a la evolución, a este ser luz, con toda la tecnología desarrollada, logramos tener la telepatía o la clareaudiencia o la clarividencia, que son aspectos evolutivos del cuerpo de luz. Entonces, bueno, aquí un poco para dar el paso también a, a la charla y al tejido, traer la, pues sí, la memoria de nuestros pueblos ancestrales que se han conectado con esta tecnología del ser y del hacer y que en este momento son los guardianes y guardianas de la biodiversidad que tenemos y ver cómo hacemos esta conversa del tejido entre este mundo moderno que viene de la cosmovisión materialista cartesiana a este mundo expansivo y evolutivo. Fin chinga y aquí dejo la puntada para que demos la charla. I'll pass the word to someone else.
Thank you so much, Kuku. And for folks that want to come back to the main room to listen in English, you click the interpretation button and then back to original audio. And for folks that would prefer to listen in Spanish, you can now switch to the Spanish interpretation channel. Thank you, Kuku, and thank you, Pablo, for providing this interpretation. It's such a gift to be able to connect across language. And from here, I'd like to invite in Wakanyi Hoffman. And as I said, I'll put the bio in the chat to kind of support the flow. So Wakanyi, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Kuku, for that. I was enchanted, and I can't wait to dig into more of what you're inviting us to sit with, which is quite a lot. And I hope I'll be building on that. What does it mean to be human and to sit with all these questions that we have? Our ability to relate with the earth, our ability to relate to ourselves, our inner selves, and our ability to then relate with each other as more than just human beings, but more relational beings. My presentation, I will also share a few slides on the screen. I'll be talking about Ubuntu. Can everybody see my screen?
Mhm.
Brilliant. And because I have 7 minutes, I'm going to time myself so that I don't take too much time. So I'll be talking about how we can bridge AI or AI technology, spirit and earth, or human spirit and the earth with Ubuntu. And Ubuntu being this philosophy of relating, of being human. It's an African indigenous ontology of relational intelligence. And so I'll be talking a little bit about what Ubuntu is and how we can unlock or activate our way of being with each other, which is not only about the head and the heart, but actually an integrated way of being human together. And that then how we bridge our spirit, the spirit of humanity, to the spirit of the earth that we all share, and AI as the extension of this relational intelligence that we live within a field of that. So what does Ubuntu mean, and what is it as an ontology of relational intelligence? I like to quote Desmond Tutu, who's maybe some of you are familiar with his work. He was the late Desmond Tutu. He was an archbishop, an Anglican church archbishop in South Africa, who talked about how we exist in and through one another. Ubuntu is a word that really means humanity. And there are many ways that we talk about Ubuntu. There are many cognates of Ubuntu, words that are related. For example, in the Shona people of Zimbabwe, they would say Unhu. My own mother tongue is Kikuyu from Kenya. We say Umundu. In Kiswahili as well, I speak Kiswahili from Kenya as well, we say Utu. It's really this essence of being. And it's a very hard to translate concept because it's an embodied way of being. But it has traveled across Africa with different communities and usually captured in this saying that a person is a person through other persons. One of the criticisms that people give about Ubuntu is that is it just about persons? And really, the reality is that when we talk about a person, it's not the matter person, the body of a person. It's a relational field that a person exists in, which extends to all other relations, all other more than human relations in nature, and we are part of that, right? And so that also includes technology. And I often say that if we were to build technology from an Ubuntu perspective, it would be a completely different technology. It would be dialogical. We would be having more discussions. It would be, the sustainability of it would be built into it. A Zulu elder in South Africa said to me, we build with the earth, not from the earth. So we would not be extracting without the concept of how to replenish. So even the material aspect of the technology would be very, very much rooted in the idea of rebuilding, relating. The relationship with the earth creates the conditions for us to build something that is with the earth. So we're co-creating with Mother Earth rather than extracting from the planet. And, Ubuntu emerged out of South Africa during the post-apartheid period, and it was actually added as a word in the agreement for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where they said that these atrocities, the atrocities that had been done on Black people in the country, could now be addressed on the basis that there is a need for understanding, but not for vengeance. A need for reparation, but not for retaliation. A need for Ubuntu, but not for victimization. So Ubuntu captures this idea that when you are in the mess of being human together, that there is a position that you take with the other. There's a stance, there's a moral stance that you take, which the Lakota people would call that the ethical space. I call it the moral space that you occupy in order to meet the other eye to eye as human beings first, whilst suspending your judgment of the other, but definitely not flattening the experience of difference. It's suspending that judgment so that you can see what the differences are and what could be a common ground. That's Ubuntu in a nutshell. So it's a form of co-created humanity. We're continually co-creating our humanity, which again extends to all our relationships. And so there's no African philosopher who has not argued that African philosophy is humanistic, but the humanistic part is not about being human only in the human form. It includes other relationships. Sorry, I didn't start from scratch. That's funny. There we are. So what is, when I talk about Ubuntu, that idea of standing in that space and meeting each other as human beings, first and foremost, that dignity that you offer each other despite the differences, is what I call seeing the other through Ubuntu eyes, or clariscopic Ubuntu vision. It's a clarity of seeing. And that symbol, there is actually a symbol of Ubuntu, usually captured in that way. And you can see it in tribal wear, you can see it in patterns, usually in fabric and in beaded pieces. So for this purpose, for this presentation, I want us to imagine that what would happen if we combined Ubuntu, this idea of being human together, with our extended intelligence, being artificially extended, AI, and how that can expand this interspecies relational intelligence, that we have this opportunity to do that. But we can only do that if we actually show up from a place of Ubuntu. If we come into relationship with the other, if we look at our differences not as something not as something to clear, not as something to resolve, but actually as the mess of being human together, through which then something like lotuses can begin to come out of our relationships. So that's the interspecies relational intelligence that I try to drive in with my message about Ubuntu. And so oftentimes Ubuntu is seen as a field of all possible relationships. And these relationships include our technologies, include our spirit and the earth. So we all coexist in this field of all possible relationships. And in order to be in relationship, we have to find the agency within us as free agents to stand in that field of relationships. And as you see now here with this image of this woman, she's from the Turkana tribe in Kenya. That pattern, if you think about technologies that we have today, the LLMs that we have, I don't think the AI systems that we have right now are able to read what that pattern is. But if you're coming from a place of Ubuntu, I can already see what that pattern might mean to this particular woman. All of those particular beads have a meaning. As you can see, she's wearing a string of brown beans. That is signifying life, the potential to always grow something with the earth. So while she's wearing what appears to be a necklace, it is not only for aesthetics purposes. She's carrying a message about her relationship to people. The red beads are symbolic of usually marriage or marriageable age. The yellow bead is what you receive at the beginning of life to symbolize fertility or prosperity as a woman, usually yellow, and the boys get green. So every single one of those beads has a meaning, and that meaning is relational. So just wearing that piece indicates that she is in relationship with the earth, with the beads, with the beans. She's in relationship with children. She's in relationship with other human beings. And all these other beads convey a particular message about relationality. So that when we say a person is a person through other persons, she's carrying that message, and that message goes across to everyone who interacts with her. So what are these ethics or wisdoms of Ubuntu? And Ubuntu is two words that means Ubuntu, being human, which is what Mogobe Ramose, sort of the contemporary father of Ubuntu right now, says it's a process of being, becoming. So there's a never-ending, and I love that Kuku showed us, time is non-linear, but it's also this collapsed time and space. Ubuntu is being, becoming, continuous relational intelligence. And it begins with your ability to manage your survival instincts so that you're not attacking. So that animalistic, primordial survival instincts, you learn between the ages of 0 to 7 to be in full command and control of your intelligences, of your survival instincts. And then you move into solidarity, where you form relationships with others. And through that solidarity, which is again the stance that you take to relate with the other, it does not require you to be similar to the other person, but it requires you to see yourself in the other. And from there, you start to respect one another. You can only respect that with whom you're in relationship with. And then compassion, you soften into compassion. And of course, then it ends up with dignifying all of life, the relations that have emerged out of just the encounter with the other, who's yourself. And so what are the aesthetics of connecting technology, spirit, and earth? If you look at how, particularly in the African context, which is where Ubuntu emerges from, every piece of art is so elegant. The end product is so elegant because there's a lot of care. It's making care visible. Every piece of art signifies the relation of field that that person was creating the piece from. So it is really making care visible through the intelligence that builds something like that. It's what a dear friend of mine, his name is Ariel Hernandez from the Philippines. He talks about this is the art of becoming homo curano, becoming the caring human. And that is taking the technology from the materials from the earth and using the technology, the storytelling, the art of doing, the artisanal intelligence to create something beautiful and elegant that continuously reminds us of our relationship with the earth, our relationship with each other, and our relationship with the field. And so from that perspective, creativity doesn't begin where separation begins. It actually begins where separation ends, where you see the phrase of our relationships. It is about repairing the fabric of that relational field. If you look at that woman, what she's making there, she's so joyful creating something, and it's not just for aesthetics purpose. There is a pattern. That pattern might mean something to her in terms of her relationship to the people around her, to her family, to others. Every single little bead is conveying a message, and that message is always in relationship to yourself, with others, and with the planet. That is sort of the technology that would build a different outcome if we were to come from a place of Ubuntu. And this removes us from just thinking to feeling and beyond, Ashley.
Wakanyi, about 1 more minute or so.
I'm nearly done.
Okay,
so
please.
it's about moving the me and you to a place of us. And this is a dynamic space that we enter. It's not just a place that you come in and you're permanently stuck. It's not the idea of community as a stuckness, as a place where you cannot emerge out of. It's actually the idea is that you come in as you please, but you have this agency and this desire to relate to others. And so that's what I call claroscopic Ubuntu vision. It's seeing with Ubuntu eyes. It's what the Samburu women of northern Kenya would say, Medua Ayega. Those who live together can't see each other. They begin to become one. And from that oneness, we begin to have better relationship with the planet, and we build different technologies out of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Wakanyi. That's so beautiful. Yeah, I see clapping and globes floating, and yeah, and if anybody has questions along the way, please jot them down or add them to the chat, and we can weave them in when we get to the more whole group discussion part of the talk. And from here, we're going to transition over to Angel, who will be sharing. Here you are, Angel, and I will add his bio into the chat.
Thank you so much, Dan, and everybody for being here. And yeah, also like I'm amazed by the presentations before. I was trying to think like how to weave that in to what I want to share, and hopefully some maybe a common conscience will evolve from all of us to find ways. Like I feel like I am what I'm going to try to weave in for this next 7 minutes has to do with maybe more of a pragmatic, or I would say maybe impact of technology, and specifically digital technology into Earth, and therefore also the well-being of humans and all beings. So that it's kind of connecting to the spirit part of it as well. So I will start by throwing in some. I don't have any presentation to share, or actually I do, but it would be a little bit too long. So I'll just try to throw in some data, and hopefully there will be time to have some questions at the end. So for me, like I want to start by saying that all the data generated and consumed and stored digitally as of 2025 in the world is approximately 180 zettabytes, which is something so large that I think human minds cannot even begin to comprehend. But more than the data itself, what I think it's most important to get from here is that this number is actually growing exponentially, and around every 2 to 3 years, this number is actually doubling. And in the past 2 years, we've generated more than 90% of all the data that has ever existed digitally in the world. So all of that is very staggering to me, very mind-blowing. As you probably know, the human life is linear in its nature, meaning that we are not used to, or we are not able to cope with exponential increase in any way. So those are the ages that we're actually that's the age that we're living in. Sorry. And this exponential increase in data actually has to do a lot with like all the new technologies that we are now kind of used to utilize on the everyday. So for example, since the introduction of the internet not so long ago, now it seems like these old times where like the internet was full of static websites is long gone. And we have a lot of dynamic content. Everything is in the cloud. We have a lot of video streaming. Everybody's consuming short videos on different platforms. There is social media. Lately, there is also the concept of Internet of Things, where more and more everything is interconnected. And this is like a ever increasing trend. So it seems like the mainstream society actually wants to have everything interconnected, sending ever increasing amounts of data, including also AI and AI related applications for all the different devices. So all of that, it's of course not like the cloud. It's actually a very real thing. It's not something up there, but it's very large data centers full of hardware that uses rare earth and a lot of different minerals to be built, and all of these things are interconnected with large underwater cables to enable all this. So, and there is an ever increasing need of like having more data centers, more cables, and all of that is actually powered through a lot of energy, and a lot of water is also used mostly to cool down those machines in the data centers. I'm not going to throw in the data, like I can share later the slides of a webinar that I gave not so long ago, where you can see all the numbers about all of that. But for example, well, I would say funny, but actually not that funny quote that I kind of, like, it stuck with me, is if you take Google's annual energy consumption, it's over 1 trillion coffee cups if you were doing the coffee cups using energy, so that's the energy equivalent. Also, for those of you who remember the early days of the internet, as I said, like it was very decentralized and very static. And now it seems like most of the things that are consumed and that are used are social media, and mostly is in the hand of very big corporations. And the main problem with that is, well, I would start in a different way. It's actually very convenient because most of these things are for free. And when things are for free, it means that you're basically the product. And you're probably very aware that there is a lot of big data processing with all the data that these big tech companies get from all of us. And this data, they monetize it, they sell it to people that actually use that data to influence, for example, in political elections or targeted advertising. And all of that money is actually used as well, like partially, to lobby, to pass laws in different countries that are going to be promoting those companies, meaning most of most of the things that actually these big companies want are actually not pro-life because they are searching the ever-growing profit, which at some point, again, as with any exponential growth in the earth, it's not compatible with life. There is a famous economist from Greece called Yanis Varoufakis. He recently wrote a book called Techno-Feudalism. And what he's basically advocating for is that these big companies, they own our data and they make money with it. And this is creating a kind of like a new feudalism relationship with people, where we're losing more our rights and our capacity, and they are increasingly gaining space in terms of political decisions, etc. So all of that sounds very bleak, but thanks, Dan, for sharing the reference. There are thankfully things that that can be done, and I represent in this panel the European Eco-Village movement, and not only the eco-villages, but many other people are, since many years, they've already done a lot of initiatives towards trying to revert or fight back all those, let's say, effects. On the one hand, what we're doing right now, for example, is increasing our data literacy and the awareness of our privacy. Like, where is actually our data going, and what can we do about that? Another very important thing, which I think it was also hinted by the previous opponents, is about digital degrowth and mindfulness. Like, it's not enough that we have all of this data and bandwidth at our disposal. We don't need to use it. We can also practice digital detox, and we can decide to use more ethically the resources that we have. Another one is digital sovereignty. We can decide which tools to use. There is something called open source. Open source, it's a much more horizontal way of creating tools. So we are not bound to use the tools that are being offered by these big tech companies just because they are convenient. The same can be said about digital resilience. We can use federated systems. I could give you examples. I only have 1 minute left, but in the questions I will definitely give you examples. We can use also federated systems. We can use alternative access to the internet. We can use offline knowledge preservation methods, and we can increase our culture of repairing technology. And last but not least, technology also gives us very cool things. Like, back in the day, we only could use representative democracy because we didn't have access to such an amazing tool as the internet. So there are many tools out there that some governments are already using to implement a more direct democracy using digital means. So there is also good things about technology is just about being very mindful and ethical about using it. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Angel, and for leading that transition to the earth and kind of the shift from spirit to earth. And from here we'll come to Nicole, and I'll spotlight you here, Nicole. And welcome.
Thank you, Dan. I just need to take a moment and thank Dan because he has an exquisite ability to put together a panel. He asked me to join this a bit late, and I wasn't entirely sure why he was asking me to join, and now I am absolutely sure, and the arc is perfect. I feel like I have had the privilege through the last couple of years to get to steep in many of the relational worldviews, whether it's Ubuntu, other indigenous worldviews that have really increased my own ability to think about how do we put that into practice. And at the same time, I've also been grappling with the very hard and harsh realities that were just presented: techno-feudalism, surveillance capitalism, the digital footprint, all of that. And so I'm going to talk and get my screen set up here for you. I recently started a new organization that is digital in large part. We're both digital and local. And I have had to figure out how. Can you see my screen? No. Why? Let's see. One more second here. Let's try that again. Is it not coming up?
It looks like it's loading.
How about now?
There we go. Yep.
Okay, great. So I've recently launched a new organization called Otherwise that is a digital learning community. And so because we operate on this theory of change that is cosmolocal, working where we are bioregionally with the particularities of our practices and our places and our experiences, but trying to exchange insights and preserve possibilities through online gatherings and learning journeys, I had to really think through, well, how are we going to do this, right? How are we going to do this and defy the default? How are we going to put into practice a set of digital ethics that match our relational ethics and allow us to have a relationship we can be in integrity with technology? And just in case the concept of cosmolocalism is a little new or new in this context, the concept comes from the design build space, design global, build local, and sort of the small, local, open, connected. But we've applied that to education, meaning we're trying to really do this collapse responsive pursuit of entangled liberation in sessions like this. But what are the platforms we're doing it on? And so as we've been in this work, we've realized that the technologies keep getting smarter, and smarter machines require wiser relationships and guardianship practices. And that really the devil's in the default often. These things have come into our lives so quickly. Their material footprint and extractive logics behind them are often very invisibilized. And the technologies become obligate in order to function in the now as we try to build our way back towards the world of many worlds and reciprocity that we want to be in. And so Otherwise developed a set of digital ethics at our founding as a part of prefigurative practice, saying that, we really wanted to leverage digital technology to expand and increase access to knowledge, to promote that exchange and engagement I just talked about, to support networked communication and movement building, while also deepening relational capacity and the actual provision of creative care, and then eventually make people less dependent on these advanced technologies. So to use them in responsible and discerning ways while we have them now, so we are not just sort of in our own echo chambers. And doing all of that has required us to think about what is a practice of what we call technotending, a sort of sacred and discerning, rhythm-attuned way of relating to technology. one that doesn't just reject it or uncritically assimilate it, but stay with the questions of how each tool shapes and is shaped by the web of life. We think about it as sort of gardening for circuitry, beekeeping in the digital wilds. How do we take the things we learn as a beekeeper, as a gardener, and actually bring them into these spaces instead of being like, ugh, I don't want to be on Zoom again, or I don't, I need to put my phone away. And also, it has involved increasingly a bit of the loosening of the binaries between the natural and the artificial. And I would say we have reclaiming here, but exploring the possibilities that even technologies forged in empire and extractive capitalism, and by all of us who are creatures of the carbon pulse, to use Nate Hagen's term for our time, that these technologies might be reconciled into the weave of life if we can approach them with greater tenderness. And so I was really like in coming up with this concept and trying to put it into practice, thinking about the ancient Greek techne, meaning craft or artistry or skill, and the etymological root there, but trying to disrupt some of the techno-optimist discourse here and some of that reactionary discourse. And I was really influenced too by the work of the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures Collective and the meta relational AI collaborations, just to like stretch and get out of some of the binary thinking that I saw cropping up in myself around all of this. And so this approach sort of counters all the things you see on this screen. I'm not going to go through the list, but there's all of these things that are defaults in the tech world and that we need to destabilize and question, while also trying to relate more to movements that feel a little more comfortable, right, within transition spaces and eco-villages and alternative education, right, things we're excited about, like right to repair and relational design and appropriate technology. And so these are all things we're talking about and playing with in our community, while also doing a bunch of that education on surveillance capitalism and digital sovereignty. So we find that we're asking questions, lots of questions, about which technologies can be rewoven into reciprocal systems and which ones must be actually refused or disarmed or laid to rest. We're asking actively what kinds of attention and care and practices allow us to enter right relation with our tools. And I think the earlier sessions in this series really helped with that. When is refusal a form of repair? And when might relation shift support that repatterning? And how do we tell the difference between something that can be a life-serving amplifier versus a disembodied accelerant? And those are not things I have answers to right now, though Angel gave us a sense of where we might go. And I'm going to skip over that right now, but we have used, and when we established our organization, we used all open source and self-hosted software. We did it without touching Google. We did it. We don't even meet on Zoom mostly. We have a self-hosted MiroTalk server and a Jitsi server. And these things are full of friction, right? Like absolutely full of friction. And part of it is getting people to recognize that the smoothness is part of the lie, and that this stuff maybe shouldn't be as easy. And if we can practice it in our digital lives, what kind of shifts can we then build our muscles for in our physical and our material embodied lives? And so thinking through the process of that, like as we open this up for questions, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the how and why of what we're doing. And some of the challenges we've encountered, but I actually think it's a critical prefigurative practice right now to be stepping into the discomfort and the difficulty of being on a system, a platform that doesn't have all the bells and whistles of Zoom, and thinking about those trade-offs, and then thinking about how comfortable we are, especially with rising authoritarianism and fascism, doing things on extractive platforms. So as I was going through all of this and holding the tension around whether and how to engage with AI, potentially meta-relationally, and whether and how to use certain technologies, I came back to the Shambhala warrior prophecy, and right around the time of Joanna Macy's passing, revisited it to think about it in this time, and came up with what you see on the screen, which I'm happy to share too in the chat. And yeah, that's a bit about what we're up to. And so here's just an example of an organization trying to put all of this into very imperfect, bumpy practice right now. Guess I can turn it back over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicole. Yeah, for your grounding us in the practical ways you're applying some of this wisdom and knowledge. And as I'm gonna now add all the speakers on the screen here. And actually, due to time, we're gonna skip over the middle section and open this up into the kind of whole group Q&A discussion. So how this will work is if you have a question, you can either raise your digital hand or your actual hand. The digital might be easier for me to see, or just comment in the chat your question. And then I'll add a spotlight to you. So you'll join the kind of the fishbowl here in the middle, and then you can share your question or comment, and this can open up the discussion with the speakers here. Yeah, does that make sense to everybody? And does anybody have a question to kick us off? Yeah. Question or comment? And including the speakers, if you have questions for each other, you're welcome to ask. I see Ellie. Cool. So Ellie, I will add you here, and you can.
It's not really a question. I have to jump off in a minute, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you and appreciation for all that you've all brought. It's really been so inspiring, and yeah, deeply grateful. So just a thank you, and I'm going to have to leave, but thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Ellie. And as Nicole shared with the, not as big technologies, these awkward silences, the glitchiness, the things in between are part of the process. So I want to invite appreciation for silences in between questions. And welcome, Sam.
Yeah, thank you all. I had to skip out in the middle, so I missed a middle section, but I was just interested to know, if any or all of you have done thinking about what a kind of ethical AI might look like, what a large language model that did feel, authentic, that wasn't based on theft. Have you done thinking about that? Is there people working on that?
I can respond to that if that's okay, Dan. Yeah. So I'm part of a project called Wakanyi AI, and I'll put it in the chat there. And that is really well researched and ethically sourced data. It's actually more of a curation. I don't even like to think of it as an AI system, although it is built as an artificially intelligent curation of mostly spiritual teachings and faith traditions, and also indigenous wisdom keeping that you can find in the AI system. So that's one way. But I have to say, at the same time, my own position with this is always to the human. What does it mean? What does it mean to build with the earth? What kind of technologies could we build if we thought about it like that? Because we know that these systems are material. There's a materiality of this technology, right? And there's a finite amount of resources on the planet. And we are essentially taking from one place and creating something else and then distributing it. I'm unconvinced that model, no matter what we tell ourselves, that's going to work. It's not. It will not. And we've had technologies before. We've had all kinds of tools before. AI is not new. in sort of in the human imagination. There are other forms of artificial intelligence that don't require us to extract from the earth. And I think if we go back to what Einstein, how he told us, right, discovered that we use about 3% of our natural computational energy for our brain capacity. How about unlocking the other 97%? So AI is actually built on that 3% of our entire brain capacity. So it means we have this other potential to build, to grow our consciousness in ways that we don't even know, in profound ways. But if we focus on this 3% of our intelligence that has built artificial intelligence, we have the potential to actually really, in a very catastrophic way, destroy the planet because there is not enough resources to keep powering these systems. So I think I would love to see an AI system that has a end of life built into the design of it so that it can be repurposed to become some other different kind of tool. As we've had other tools that stopped being the tool that they were. Nobody's walking around with a spear to kill the other person, right? We then developed other tools. So maybe that is a healthy, helpful position to take when we're thinking about AI.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, would anybody like to add to that before?
Yeah, I'll just jump in a little bit and really encourage folks to look at the work that the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures Collective has done on this and is in a sort of learning out loud and in practice inquiry that is really challenging. So I put the Burnout from Humans link in there. And then the Distributed AI Research Institute, Timnit Gebru's organization is also doing really interesting work. I have two sort of sets of reactions to the question. Sam, you mentioned sort of something not built on theft. And I think it is simultaneously, two things are true here. This is all being built on theft after theft after theft after theft. And yet there's also the potential, depending on how we meet this, and this might be a very small potential, for this to be an opportunity for us to loosen enclosures as well. So while the people developing these platforms are trying to take us in a direction that I absolutely do not want to go, the whole TESCREAL bundle and set of ideologies around transhumanism and extropianism and long-termism and singularitarianism and all that crazy stuff, like those are not the folks we need to be following at all. And yet, have they accidentally helped to erode enclosure through the practices of what they're doing? And so if any of that is some of us with the kinds of ethics that bring us into these spaces, perhaps should be paying more attention to what's going on there and curiously, carefully, and with a lot of discernment, engaging in co-stewardship. I don't do this at the heart of what I do, but I've been exploring around with folks who are focused on that fully. And there's a lot of disagreement, even in our own community, about it. A lot of huge feelings, a lot of fracturing, but a disagreement held well can be a source of calibration in all of this. And I will say with my own experiments, even on extractive platforms, these tools can be really useful for developing greater onto-epistemic flexibility and practicing relating beyond the human to come back and human to human or being to being, living being to living being relate differently. It's just a bit of experience over the last couple of months.
Thank you. And then, yeah, Kuku and Angel, Angel, I saw you both, gesture towards wanting to add something. And then Robert, I'll invite you in. Sorry for pinning you so early. I can remove and then add you in after they share.
Okay, you could have removed me and put me in later on.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll add you back.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kuku and Angel, if you'd like to add, you're more than welcome.
Bueno, es algo importante. Quiero preguntar si necesitan tiempo para cambiar el canal. ¿No? Ok. Es algo importante en cuanto a la crisis civilizatoria nos está mostrando este punto culmen, ¿no? Del antropoceno, de extraer los recursos como también lo trae Wakanyi, como lo hemos traído todos aquí en la charla, y puntualmente en el sur, donde estamos viviendo todo el extractivismo, la economía extractivista, también el genocidio de nuestros pueblos originarios, que son guardianes y guardianas de la biodiversidad y de este tejido inteligente, de la tecnología de la vida, ¿no? Entonces ahí es como la ética de todo lo que hacemos, que así como estamos aprendiendo a reciclar, estamos aprendiendo a volver a cultivar nuestros alimentos, estamos aprendiendo de la economía circular, estamos aprendiendo a construir de otras maneras, a tomar decisiones de otras maneras. Cómo es importante que también nos reflexionemos en el descenso energético y el impacto que está teniendo la tecnología digital en el extractivismo de los territorios y lo que decía un poco Ángel con los campos de database que no solamente extraen agua, desplazan gente, deforestan bosques y estos son una nube que no existe, nos están dando unas maneras de pensar irreales que realmente tienen un impacto aquí en la Tierra. Estamos consumiendo cada vez que subimos 2, 3 videos en los diferentes canales y redes sociales, ¿no? Para posicionarnos dentro de una economía que sigue el mismo ritmo, sin límites, es basura tecnológica. Esa basura tecnológica también está impactando nuestra Tierra. Entonces, la responsabilidad de si no usamos correos, borramos correos, no necesitamos subir 1000 videos, no necesitamos que ¿no? Como esta interactividad también nos tiene que llevar a pensarnos en una ética y por eso traemos los conceptos de regeneración, ¿cierto? De cómo esta inteligencia natural ha pervivido millones de años en esta evolución de la vida, no solamente de la humanidad, sino de la vida, y cómo seguimos conectados a la evolución cósmica en donde hay otras razas estelares, hay otras dimensiones, como nos lo muestra la cuántica, en donde las tecnologías libres se usan, en donde el cuarzo no se usa para sacarlo y ponérselo a un computador, sino que el cuarzo es una tecnología en sí misma, donde conecta todas las redes cósmicas, ¿sí? Entonces, ¿cómo volvemos a aprender de estos conceptos que gracias que tenemos nuestros pueblos originarios vivos y que nos están mostrando cómo ellos han pervivido millones de años desde esa cosmovisión eh, cuidando desde el pluriverso, desde el buen vivir, ¿sí? Entonces allí yo siento que la ética tiene que integrar los conceptos naturales como la unidad, la conciencia, la interdependencia, la interconexión y que todos aprendamos también a, a reducir y a ser parte del descenso energético y de darnos la apertura a este salto dimensional de activar nuestra tecnología divina, ¿no? Que desde allí el internet nos lo muestra y qué bueno vernos en este momento, me encanta verlos, pero la telepatía, ¿no? Es otra transmisión de maneras de comunicarnos. Entonces, bueno, así que nos siga guiando la sabiduría natural en todo este cambio juntos y gracias.
Thank you, Kuku. Thank you, Pablo, for the wonderful interpretation. And Angel, did you want to add on this before we invite Robert in?
Yes, I would love to add in. I'm actually these days or these past few weeks I've been working on an AI article, which unfortunately is not yet ready, and I just want to bring like maybe a little bit of a different voice. So I think when we talk about the ethics of AI, actually the ethics of any technology is like we have to be aware that technology never exists in a vacuum. Technology is always, let's say, tainted, or it has the flavor, the ethical flavor of whoever is actually owning that technology. And unfortunately, in the world that we live in, technology is in the hands of this big tech, which again, like, is bringing us to this like techno-feudalism era. So we also have to consider that AI is currently now, let's say, one of the biggest in terms of geopolitics. Like all the governments are actually trying to invest in having the most advanced AI. So For me, ethics of AI does not have to do necessarily just with whether they are committing theft by acquiring the data, because actually, even if we put all our best efforts to generate like an ethical AI, we're not going to stop these people from actually doing these unethical things. So I think the energy should go more towards how can we actually modify and the system, right? Because AI can be done in an ethical way, but the reality is that because of its geopolitical importance, it's not going to happen. So in terms of ethics, I mean, it's great that this research is being made, but for me, like the most important thing is, yeah, it's a whole systems approach. So, and I would also put into the mix that it's not just about like copyright, and I could agree a lot with this idea of like unboxing things, but if the data ends up in the hands of these corporations, then I'm not so much in favor of this unboxing. And at the same time, I also would love to throw into the mix like the unethical part of using increasing amounts of energy and water to actually train those systems. So that it's also highly unethical from the point of view that it's actually negating life on the planet.
Thank you, Angel, and inviting Robert back in, and then Sylvia, I see, added a question in the chat, so I'll invite Sylvia in next.
Yeah, thank you for all of you for participating and for your really brilliant talks you give. And I feel very inspired, and actually also all this information I got from you about the projects you are doing or the other ones which you also share. And I want to give a comment on what you've been saying and what came up in me when I heard what you said. And I have a technical background. I was working the last 5 years for doing projects for circular products which won't make waste anymore. So actually, that's what we need actually in this to make the technology compatible with us, because actually technology or we it's our space of living which we destroy. Nature will survive. It's about us. So, and if we don't respect each other, and if we don't respect us, then we go on as we go on. And we have to become adult, because what I see, all these great big companies, if you look at all the big companies, all these big tech, they were all founded by really young people. And I don't, and as a young person, you have a certain mindset. You cannot know what it is becoming 80 years old and what has happened since then over your lifetime. And that means all this technology is, I would say, a technology in childhood. And therefore, it also addresses us as children. And we are playful and we use it and we like it to use. And as it becomes easier, we even like it more. So it's something we have to turn. And I see your projects all are somehow related to that, and I'm very happy about it. And it's about man. It's not about technology, or it's about humans. It's not about technology. And I like very much what you said, Wakanyi. It's about being in the mess of being human and realizing or acknowledging it, that there is a mess. And it's not about the idealistic views, but it's how it's now and how we get onto that. And therefore, we have to break up our relationship to these companies, which really doesn't help us. So, and I don't see actually, AI is really big, but I just want to say, look at textile industry. This is an age-old industry. And we haven't done a single thing which really makes it better. It's not there. So there are, I work in this, I work in that area, so I know there are some companies who are doing it, but the scale in which it is done, it's so small that we have so many other problems too. So I'm just want to say AI may be one of that because it needs lots of resources, but we're already extracting so many things on all scales that it really makes me shivering how we go on. But therefore, I'm happy to being with you and just sharing, our thoughts and perhaps going somewhere else in another discussion.
Yeah, thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Robert. And before passing it on to the speakers to respond, I'm going to invite Sylvia in, who added a question in the chat. If you want to voice it here, you're welcome to.
Wakanyi replied very kindly to my question. Yes, but no problem. The thing is that I don't want to be, I've always been very optimistic, and I'm coming from the Earth Charter International knowledge and collaboration. So I find it very difficult to see how the love that it's encompassed within the Ubuntu philosophy can really fight against what we are, apologize, fight against, or not, don't want to say fight, but answer or juxtapose itself with what is going on in terms of devouring the Earth's resources and I don't know, cannibalizing us and our cultures, our differences, and everything. I really cherish new technologies because we can talk, we can share. But once this seminar is finished, I can see adolescents ruining their lives because of what they see in Instagram, or people not being able to have critical thinking anymore. I don't know, but I don't want to add negativity here. So that's it. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Sylvia. And yeah, we've got about 6 minutes until the end of the session. If we can go a little bit over, if folks are okay. But yeah, I'll give it back to the panelists to add. And
I can respond. I think, Sylvia, I share the same concerns. I'm a very optimistic person, and I'm also a mom to 4 children. And so I share all the concerns that you have. One thing that gives me a little bit of hope, especially when you're talking about Ubuntu, this sort of Ubuntu is a universal concept, right? But it's a very Pan-African embodied experience in that sense. And if, as the statistics that we have right now, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people by 2050 or something like that will be of African descent. Well, actually, one in 4 by 2030 is going to look like more like me. And the children that are being born certainly will reflect that in the world's population. That's one. First of all, to begin, we don't even need to look that far out. There's already 1.5 billion Africans on the continent, right? And we're trying to push this very anti-African experience to a group, to a population that is awake, actually, that practices Ubuntu. There's no way. It's not going to work. I have to be fair. I mean, maybe I'll be a little bit controversial, but it's not working. Nobody is taking it this seriously. I just came back from an African-centered computer-human interaction workshop in Cairo, Egypt, filled with all kinds of Africans who are working in the technology industry. And it's a joke. Nobody wants a chatbot. Nobody wants to talk to these things. Nobody cares. The optimism is around what can I do with the tool, not what can it do for me. This is such a different mindset when you think about it. It's just a tool. It's like, okay, I can use it for something, but if it's not useful, it doesn't speak my language, it doesn't respond, it doesn't help me relate to my neighbor and my friends and the marketplace, it will not scale. It will not. So Ubuntu is very much alive. So I want to give you that hope, Sylvia, and say that across the continent, there's other things going on. There's other technologies. They're just not being reported on. And people are more and more drawing back from the ancient, not really ancient, ancestral ways of being in relationship. There is other artificial technologies that are biological that we are going back to, not really going back to, but we are embracing. They've been invisible and they're becoming mainstream. And we'll see more and more of that. And if that then begins to permeate the landscape of the world's population, because majority of the people in the planet will be of African descent, then maybe there is hope that this technology that is very limited in terms of its intelligence, in fact, is just not going to be able to compete with whatever superpowers emerge out of people's ancestral intelligences. So I'm hopeful. And I'm grateful to hear your comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Wakanyi. And now, yeah, if each panelist would like to share any closing remark or comment or anything, we can do a round and then we'll close the session after this.
I guess just to both follow that and close a little bit, I think the perspective that I hold on this, that our organization takes, is that like we are mid-collapse, right? We've been mid-collapse since the dawn of the colonial era. We've gone around the world, ending other people's world ways. We're coming real close to that. And now we're talking about it happening to those of us who did that over the last several centuries, right? That's the frame. And we're in the middle of it coming back to bite us. And how these technologies are both creatures of that process and accelerants of that process and reckoning. And it's important to recognize that the ways in which they're being both deployed and received are going to vary tremendously based on which context you're in. And I think Wakanyi's comments just now really, really show that. And so one of the things I think about a lot is I like to compare this to what was happening at the sort of dawn of the internet. And while I was really young, some of my teachers were already adults. And Nora Bateson, who is one of my dearest teachers, likes to remind us that the questions being asked in those rooms at that moment of transition were totally the wrong questions. People were like, nobody's ever going to put their credit card into this, right? Nobody's ever going to buy shoes they can't try on first, right? And so like we're clearly not in a position to necessarily be asking all of the right questions, certainly not those of us closest to the mainstream development of these technologies. And so I'm consistently reminding myself that like we are already in the reckoning and we need to be creating pockets of survival that are diverse and interconnected, not trying to put our attention to staving off what's already underway, but not letting those pockets of survival be xenophobic, not letting them be replicating the same thought patterns. And that interconnection really, really helps us make sure that we're returning to a world of many worlds. So that's why I'm still interested in being in these spaces, so that we can, really go all in on diverse, interconnected pockets of survival that mean way more than human survival.
Maybe if I may go next. Like I couldn't have said it in better words. Thank you so much, Nicole. I think it's about that, no? Like for example, the network, the Eco-Village network that I'm representing today. We are trying, like different people, and like we've seen it. Like I'm also super grateful to have shared this panel with these amazing people, and like coming from all these different perspectives, because exactly we're actually going towards a more diverse world in this reckoning, in this very messy transition back to where maybe humanity should not have ever left from, I guess. And yeah, I think it's all about like, okay, we see that mainstream is not working. Let's try to see what other things do actually work, and how can we make it in such a way that we're not repeating the terrible past that we've had as you know, like let's not forget history in order not to repeat it. So yeah, and in this transition phase, it's very interesting to still get to know like what's going on in the technology, because it's not going to be going from 0 to 1 or from 1 to 0. It's going to be, it is being for many years already a very messy transition. So I hope this was useful. I mean, definitely it was for me. So thank you so much, everybody, for sharing.
Y también quiero agradecer a este espacio pluriverso, de todos los colores, de todos los sabores, que si es que nos completamos. Y ahí me lleva una gran reflexión, y es precisamente en este cambio colectivo, como una sola familia en una sola casa madre, ¿no? Como todos creados también por el mismo amor divino, el cambiar la manera de pensar, la cosmovisión. No es solamente hablar de descolonización, porque hemos sido todos colonizados de alguna manera. Sí, en todos los territorios hemos sido colonizados o impuestos con ideas globalizadoras y hegemónicas, pero en este momento, este llamado de la vida que nos toca el corazón a todos. Nos toca a nuestros hijos, nos toca a los arbolitos, a la gente agua, a la gente montaña, a la gente abeja, a todo lo que existe. Y allí es donde necesitamos un vivir desde la conciencia, que es este gran llamado que nos hace la Madre Tierra y la vida, en donde salir de la Matrix es desobedecer esos programas, que lo hemos venido haciendo también, y el volver a reactivar el programa y el plan divino dentro de nuestra tecnología divina. Y esto implica reconectarnos, volvernos a conectar a la vida. Desde aquí de los pueblos originarios se habla del gobierno propio y del gobierno mayor. El gobierno mayor es todos los entes naturales que son espíritus mayores, como la montaña, el agua, los nevados, son territorios sagrados para la vida. Y el gobierno propio es el uno mismo, la soberanía del ser, conectada a esos principios mayores de reciprocidad, complementariedad, de, de unidad con todo lo que existe. Entonces, desde allí hay un mandato, que es la ley de origen y el orden natural. Para que se dé este orden natural, ellos dicen, todo para cuidar. Hay que cuidar todo. Hay que cuidar pensamiento, hay que cuidar palabra, hay que cuidar lo que siento, hay que cuidar lo que como, hay que cuidar lo que escucho. Todo para cuidar que cada paso nuestro sea un acto de conciencia, una decisión por la vida de todos. En cada momento, ¿no? Acá tenemos computadores, celulares, no seguir en la polarización ni en la satanización, sino cómo integrar ese aprendizaje y agradecerlo infinitamente, este desarrollo evolutivo y tecnológico que tenemos hasta hoy. Y desde ahí también, ¿cuál es el punto medio? ¿No? Encontrar este neutro, este canal, como lo dicen los budistas también, y desde los pueblos originarios, cómo encontrar este neutro, donde unimos la inteligencia natural con la inteligencia artificial, con la inteligencia de la vida y con la tecnología hermosa que tenemos todos por el solo hecho de existir aquí y ahora. Entonces, así agradecer a este espacio, agradecer la posibilidad que nos podemos ver, que nos podemos conectar, que podemos hablar en muchas lenguas, y que así lo han hecho nuestros ancestros desde millones de años atrás. Y de aquí en adelante, pues poder escuchar más a los árboles, poder escuchar más a la piedra, al agua, que son los que permiten que estemos todos aquí vivos, porque todo sale de la tierra. Y la tierra no nos pertenece, sino que nosotros pertenecemos a ella como una familia más. Fien Shinga Fie, y un abrazo de corazón a corazón. Gracias por existir a cada uno.